Bueno, y acá estamos en la iglesia San Pedro de Riga. Se mueve una gran oferta turística acá. Bonito.
Okay, so let's just divide. You guys, sorry, you go on there. Really, two of you go there.
A ver, esta iglesia es un museo. Creo que nadie reza acá. Bueno, no me acuerdo si acá hay
The location is not stealing the spotlight from the lovely historical buildings all around.
Bien, estamos continuando con el frito.
Pretty much. And by the way, we have some people from the States, but do we have someone from Texas? No? Okay, then I can make the joke. The thing is, it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a cruise ship in Riga, and when we have a cruise ship, we have more Northern Americans. It's like a law. If there's a cruise ship, there will be Canadians and Americans in the walking tour. And there was a lovely couple from Austin, Texas, and when we were passing by, they were like, you know, those armadillos, they are no fun in our country. They are like pests. They're getting in your backyard, destroying all the plants and all of that, and it's hard to get rid of them because it's hard to shoot them. The bullets bounce off. And I was thinking that's the most American sentence I have heard in my life. Because it's hard to shoot the animals because they have bulletproof vests.
ei kiired ja rotist võetakse sealt.
Ah, no, creo que sí graba, pues es dejado por hacer. No, perdón. Eso no tiene nada. ¿Y cómo pongo pausa? ¿Ah? ¿Acá se pone pausa? Ah, sí, creo. O sea,
That's the Riga's Cathedral or Riga's Dome, and that's from 1211. And I must say from 1211, because every medieval time building, a castle or cathedral, it's like a layered cake. Every century they add extras. So obviously on 1211 it wasn't so huge and massive. It had been rebuilt plenty of times, but it's starting from 1211. And if you are traveling through Europe, you are seeing that there is a cathedral in every major city. And I will be honest, ours is not the most visual experience. It's quite Spartan, also from inside. It's not like over-the-top sculptures and old coffins or stuff like that, but it has its strong side. In this cathedral, there is the 4th largest organs in Europe, and that's impressive, because they are making a lot of concerts. Not only religious or classical music, as you would expect from a cathedral. Last summer, one of my favorite concerts was Latvian indie rock with organs in background. So they're quite open-minded about more contemporary culture as well. So if you are into organ music, usually there are concerts at noon. If I recall correctly, the ticket was something around 10 euros plus minus. But then one little question. This square, how do you think this square is as old as the cathedral or much younger? Why do you think it's younger? Okay, you are judging from cobblestones, someone else? If you look that direction, you should have the answer. Something is jumping out of the ordinary. Spot on. The cathedral is way lower than we are. You know, in history there's a term called the timeline, how history progresses. Every city has its unique timeline, from the bottom to the top, because cities always build on top of themselves. Each reconstruction, fire or war, city a little bit climbs higher, and forming this thing called cultural layer, which later is job for archaeologists to dig the basements and artifacts and all of that. So if the cathedral is 1211 and it's a couple of meters below us, this is something way more recent. So this square was made only in 1936 till 37. And late 30s in Europe, that was a complicated time. You know, then Europe was just swarming with dictators. You had Stalin and Hitler and Franco and Mussolini. In Baltics though, we didn't have dictators, we had autocratical regimes. And if you're wondering what the difference, sounds the same. So in autocratical regime, there is no parliament, there is one guy who sees the power. There is certain level of censorship and propaganda, but there is no physical violence, and that's how you separate. So in autocratical regime, if you are in a political opposition, worst case scenario, you are kicked out of the country, not kicked in your head. So that's quite a big difference. But still, egomaniacs, absolute egomaniacs. If you go to some Latvian library, you take a book published in late 30s, you flip it open, first page, there would be the face of our leader, Kārlis Ulmanis, his signature, so he loved himself. And then this building is coming in the story. You can read on top Latvia's radio, so Latvia's radio. But in 30s there was a bank. And where's the entrance with those columns? On top there is a balcony with red flowers. The balcony is basically screaming, it's begging to make a speech from there. Well, there was a problem. Where we see a square, there used to be a full block of buildings. So, problem solved. Now we have a square. They demolished an entire block of buildings just to open more space for like support rallies or something like that. And about this location, I have quite a mixed feelings. You see, if we approach this question or this location from point of view of, let's say, cultural heritage, this is a tragedy. We lost an entire block of buildings. The oldest ones were even from 1600s. But if we approach the story from point of view of urban planning, this is a jackpot. Because when you travel through old cities with 800-900 years of history, they are crammed together. Narrow streets, you know, maybe one small square, because they have been defined by the city walls or other fortifications. So it's like we lost a lot, but we gained a lot. It's like a double-edged sword. And I would say this square is a great illustration for history in general. Nothing is good or bad. It's depending how you are reacting to the story. Because this destruction done in 30s is giving us a lot of options today. December, main Christmas market is here. In summer, quite often days, contemporary art festivals, Riga's jazz music festival is happening here. Or little exercise for your creative thinking. 2 weeks ago, right here, was happening Latvia's championship for beach volleyball. They built artificial beach, and you can see there's still some beach sand here and there. They built artificial beach in the middle of Old Town. Why? Because they can. So as I said, this is an absolute pros and cons story. Depends how good is your argument. And that's actually how history works as a science. You know, I can sort of shape your opinion about our autocratical leader with this example. Option A, I can say, he was a terrible person. He destroyed a lot of historical buildings. He didn't care about the cultural heritage. Option B, he was a progressive person. He understood that the city is too squished together, so he opened a little bit of a more space for culture. And that's history in a nutshell. It depends how you write the sentence. Because it's the same event, same location, it depends how you are looking at this event. Any questions? Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, they are the bullet holes from 1991. We started to step out of the USSR in 1990 with May 4 when we signed our independence declaration. But in 1991 in August in Soviet Union there was this moment when a lot of Soviet hardliners, like old grumpy generals, were trying to restore the USSR. The same was happening not only in the siege in Moscow but also here. And at the same time in the parliament, which is down the street, all parliament restored the constitution. So made country like, yeah, now there is a country, you can do nothing. And it was basically one grumpy Soviet soldier who was just like, venting out. He just emptied one magazine on the facade. It wasn't attack or something like that. It was this local incident where one soldier just went a little bit berserk. No one suffered, it was just bullet holes.
No, but I suppose because it's a radio.
Yeah, they were trying to overtake every important building, obviously, to seize the power, but the parliament already passed the constitution, plus the uprising in Moscow also failed, so yeah, they just went it out. Okay, well, let's go. They were hooligans. Parliament called Saima, so the seat of the power. And how this country works, you would call it the British democracy. We have a parliament, the multi-party system in our case. We have a prime minister as well, The president, he exists, but he's like the queen in UK, more for handshakes and smiles. You know, the diplomatical function, a representational function. Our president holds certain power, but it's not so seen on a daily basis. He's more reacting to politics, not creating politics. Because for example, in USA or in Russia, president is the driving force. In our case, he's more in the back seat. And about the building, it's older than the country. And that's always confusing people. Because you know, there are two separate things. History of Latvia as a country, and history of Latvia as a territory. Because as I said, we have been conquered by pretty much everyone. So we made our country first time only in 1918, November 18, right after the First World War. You know, during the First World War, there was revolutions both in Germany and in Russia. So there was a lack of superpowers. A lot of countries in the middle, they said, this is our moment. We can say that we want to have our own country. So in 1918, November 18, we signed our independence of declaration, but then the neighbors disagreed, meaning Bolsheviks moved in from the east, and remains of the German 8th Army moved in from the west. They wanted to restore like a sort of a Baltic German monarchy. So we have this moment, the War of Independence, 1918 till 1920, where we are fighting Germans and Russians at the same time. And that's probably the most confusing time in our history. There is this one amazing historian, Erik Jakobsson. He has dedicated his entire life to try to understand this War of Independence. I just recently finished one of his books. He states that on 1919, on Latvian soil, there was 15 different armies. So I will not go into this story. It was quite a complicated thing. One city was conquered by Danes, just to showcase how random it was. But yeah, it was a complicated time, but after that we kicked out Germans, we kicked out Russians, well, Bolsheviks to be more precise term, and then since 1920 until the Second World War, we have a country. So if the building is older than the country, what was there before? I've a little bit oversimplified, but it was like a self-governmental institution for local German nobility, the German Landtag. So if you are in Riga and you see something national or important for Latvians today, probably it was national or important for someone else back in the day. Let's say Latvia's National Opera, where our Art Nouveau Mokito is starting. You know, glorious building, columns, triangle on top. Latvia's National Opera, sounds fancy. It was built as the city's German theater. Then we have Latvia's National Theater, where our constitution was first time signed in 1918. Then it was city's main Russian theater. So you see, in Riga, it's built by superpowers, maybe not so much by Latvians. So if you have some time, try to jump out of Riga at least for one day. Because always capitals, they are already like a bubble inside the country on their own. In Latvia's case, you can see it perfectly. Old Town is all of these superpowers. If you go to some regional city, there's a little bit different situation. So, any questions before we carry on? No? Okay, then we got that question. It's a replica. But here, couple of meters, that's the original. So in 1600s, Riga in northern Latvia, it was under the Swedish Empire, under the Swedish kingdom. And Swedes understood these brick walls built in medieval times by Germans, in 1600s, they are pointless. Because you have artillery, you have cannons, you have mortars, and if a brick wall like this will be pummeled by cannonballs, that will release like a storm of shrapnel, or it will just collapse on you. It wasn't built to withstand, you know, artillery strikes. So the Swedes, they modernized the defense of the city. And I believe you have seen the map of Riga at least once. There is Old Town, and all around the Old Town there is the canal. The canal is just a really fancy name for a moat. It's a defense line. That's why it has those even like triangles, bastions, ravelins, ramparts, and it's roughly 3 blocks that direction. While the old defense line, the city wall, was sort of left inside the city, taking space and, well, pretty much being useless. So what to do with a wall when it's not needed anymore? It's just taking space. Well, you have one wall, 2, 3 more, and a roof, you have a house. And you can see it perfectly on the top. From each side of the wall there is going a separate structure. So the wall doesn't magically end there. It's running through all of those buildings on the right side of the street as a separating wall between 2 blocks. So this is not the only bit of medieval time wall what how survived till 2019. This is one of the rare bits what you can see in the open. Because we pretty much have our entire city wall still stretching around the city. It's only covered by buildings. Maybe sometimes not like full height like this, but first floor or just basement, but it still exists. And this is the moment where Riga have this, we can call it, like almost potential to disappoint certain type of tourists. Not so much Europeans, but when they are coming people from different continents, especially from younger countries, as you know, Kiwis, Aussies, Americans, Canadians, because their countries are young. So they are looking for, you know, as old history the best, right? And when people are traveling, first thing they do, they check online, is there anything to see? And when people are reading, Riga founded during the Crusades, it's like boom, Game of Thrones in your brain, because it sounds medieval by definition. And I have seen so many people arriving here, and they are like, yeah, we thought it will be more medieval, you know, walls and towers and castles and all of that. So if you judge Riga as a medieval time city, it will disappoint. Because from medieval times, what we have, couple of meters of wall, a cathedral, some churches, and that's it. Even the cobblestones, it's late 1600s, so way after the medieval times. So Riga is a medieval time city, which is built on wealthy trade routes. So it's always growing, modernizing, and changing. So plenty of cities, they are locked inside one century, while Riga is all of those centuries in the same city. But if you are really big fans of medieval time architecture, big shout out, big commercial on northern neighbors, Estonia, Tallinn. That capital, it's an amazing example of medieval time urban planning. And it's only like 4.5 hours by bus from here. So if you want to go for something medieval, try Estonia. Any questions? The oldest structure would be, well, if you know, there's a church called St. John's. In their basement, there's one couple of meters of bricks, not bricks, but stones, which is the only remaining bit of the first Crusaders' castle. That's like element. But about the structure, there is, how it's in English, there is Riga's Decorative Art Museum. It's inside the oldest church, which is not a church anymore. It used to be the church of the castle. That's the oldest building still standing. Okay.
Here or
In all towns.
you know?
Yeah.